A lot of women spend years trying to fix themselves, their hormones, their energy, their emotions, their health. But what if the deeper issue isn't something that needs to be fixed? What if you've simply lost sight of who God created you to be? My guest Amey and I are unpacking all of that today, so let's dive in. Welcome to Faith Over Pharma, the podcast for women who want a different way to heal. I'm Susan Gladstein, holistic health practitioner and functional nutrition specialist, and here we explore faith-led, holistic approaches to hormones, energy, and symptoms that just keep getting brushed off. If that's you, you're in the right place. If you've spent years taking care of your family, showing up for everyone around you, and pushing through hard seasons, but somewhere along the way you've lost a little bit of yourself, you're not alone. And that's exactly why I created the Rooted Reset Retreat in Costa Rica. It's a week away from the noise and the constant demands of everyday life. A place where you can slow down, breathe, and reconnect with your health, your faith, and the woman God created you to be. We'll spend time talking about real ways to support your body and your health, but just as importantly, you'll have space to rest, reflect, and just simply be. Imagine waking up in the jungle overlooking the ocean, sharing incredible meals, meaningful conversations, and time with women who understand what it's like to carry a lot. If something in you feels like you need that kind of reset, I'd love for you to join us this July. Learn more at rootedresetretreat.com. So many women have spent years asking themselves the same question. What's wrong with me? I know I have. You've probably asked, why am I so exhausted? Why does my body feel like it's working against me? Why do I feel like I have to hold everything together for everyone else? But what if the better question isn't what's wrong with you? What if the real question is, who are you underneath everything you've had to carry? And my guest today, Amey, has spent years helping women explore that very question. She is a 3-time Amazon bestselling author through her contributions to Shine Your Light and Transforming Pain into Purpose. And she's also the author of her own book, Finding Your Truest You. Her work centers around helping women move beyond survival mode and reconnect with their authentic selves, and not just healing from what they've been through, but learning how to live from the wisdom that those experiences have created. And I'm so excited for our conversation because I really think it's going to resonate with so many people. And I'd kind of like to start there. What actually happens when someone stops asking, what's wrong with me, and starts asking, who am I?
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Susan. That was a question that I didn't think I was going to have to answer because I was living vicariously through my kids and I was so and so's mom and I was, booster club president, team mom, this and that and the other. And so I was happy to be that. I would not have changed any part of that. But you lose yourself. You lose yourself in that. And it wasn't until I had a life-altering event that I was alone in an apartment for the first time as an adult going, oh, what do I like to cook if I want to cook just for myself? I'm not catering to anyone. I'm not, what do you like? What do you like? You don't like this. Okay. You sit in the quiet and it's crazy how many things you think about and you start asking yourself, well, who am I? And it's not just who am I? What do I want to cook? But what do I even like to do? I'm not shuffling around from wrestling tournament to softball match to this and that. What do I like to do for myself? And how do I choose that?
That's it's so relatable. And I can think like when I personally went through that very scenario, I started to realize that I was like, and I tell this story often that I want to be like, I aspire to be like the kid lady. It's kind of like a cat lady, but with kids, because I just wanted to love on all the kids that was volunteering at my church, which ultimately led me to having more children in my 40s. But Yeah, it can be weird and very uncomfortable in the quiet because you don't know what's going to come up. When you start asking those questions, and if you've lost so much of yourself, it can be a really uncomfortable process. And I know for you, your faith helped a lot with sitting in the discomfort instead of escaping it. So I'd love to hear more about that because I know somebody's listening and they're probably in the thick of it right now and don't really know how to get past it. And if we avoid it, it just sticks with us, right?
Absolutely. I've been a Christian for a long time since I was a child, and I kind of lost that over time. We used to take our kids to school, Sunday school, church, and they were baptized when they were early. Once they started getting into sports, that kind of got put on the back burner. And I think that happens a lot with people. They're playing sports, so every weekend is kind of full of doing that. And it's not really, I would pray, especially when times were tough, but it's not until I was alone by myself. And of course, I think it's normal where people are like, God, help me, because I don't know what to do. I'm lost. I don't, this is terrible. So it was actually a blessing in disguise to reconnect with the Lord, to have a relationship with Him when I was by myself. And then when I was by myself, not just asking those questions of what I want to do and all of that, but sitting in the quiet, it gave me time to realize, I had a lot of trauma as a child and I hadn't healed from that. I took that into my marriage, which is no one's fault, but instead of saying, okay, what's wrong with me? I'm getting a divorce. I'm, going through this, that, and the other. You have to turn around and say, okay, well, why is this happening? Is this happening, besides the obvious reasons or whatever, is this happening as a result of the fact that my behavior it wasn't authentic, that's for sure. It was so different because I was living in survival mode. That was kind of how I lived my life. Go from rush, rush, rush and do this and do that. And of course, you talked about the people pleasing. So of course, I'm the ultimate, hello, I'm Amy, I'm a people pleaser. So I dealt with that too. So it's not until you get to sit alone with your thoughts and you realize that you've got some healing work you need to do, first of all, and that's what's most important.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much. So my dad committed suicide when I was 14, and I
Mm.
had felt like was a 14-year-old girl and really took that part of my life to really seize the moment, to never miss an opportunity to tell somebody you love them, to always see the positive in things instead of dwelling in the negative. But it wasn't until I was deployed to the Middle East, sitting in my windowless room, grieving over the loss of my stepdad passed away right before I left, and my grandfather passed away right before I deployed for 6 months. But being away from the ones that I love, that I really sat in it, away from the kids and, doing all the things. And I had to process that stuff, which is never fun. And the more I get into, I've been in the health and fitness space for a long time, but the more I get into it and the more I really read the word and the more people I talk to, I don't think we realize how much of our emotions come out in our health. And if we don't process that, we just hang on to it. It's just we stick with that. And I know that there's a lot of women that are listening that have probably spent years trying to, quote unquote, fix themselves, maybe their hormones, their fertility, their health, whatever it is. How do you help someone start reconnecting with who they are instead of constantly feeling like they're just a problem to solve?
What I tell people a lot of times, it was trial and error. And so what I tell people is to start doing things that, you hadn't done before. So for me, I was afraid of heights. So I went parasailing. And I tried to do some things that I had never done before to see if what I normally say, see if that sets my soul on fire. And so it's kind of a trial and error thing. I did the parasailing thing. I, did a lot of kayaking with my friends on the lake. I started traveling a lot. I traveled before I went through a divorce, but then afterwards, I started taking my mom, to other countries and visiting that and realizing that's where my soul is on fire, is going to Italy, going to Spain, going to these places that we've been to. So that's kind of what I tell people. Start there. start just trial and error. Do something that you haven't done. And I know it's scary. Believe me, I know it's scary. Especially because the first time I went parasailing, I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. This is going to be terrible. I'm afraid of heights. But I got up there. It was the most peaceful, just gliding over the ocean. It was so awesome. And so that's kind of what I tell people in the beginning. Start with something you've never done before and see how you like it. If you don't like it, don't do it again. And that's not where your heart is.
I love that advice. It's funny because during COVID, there was not really anything to do. And here in Arizona, like March is like the prime time to be outside. And so we started riding our bikes. And I hadn't done that since I was a kid. And I kind of inherited like a mountain bike from my husband when we blended families. And so I was riding that, but then the tire was flat. I ended up riding my daughter's like beach cruiser and I loved it so much. And I felt so weird and uncomfortable about asking to buy myself a beach cruiser bike because I really liked it. But in speaking up for myself over something so trivial, honestly, it was like a huge thing as a people pleaser and as somebody who should just be grateful for the things that they have to speak up and say, you know what, I really want a beach cruiser bike was like, I don't know, for me, that was kind of like the start of, well, what else can I ask for that sets my soul on fire? And I mean, it just opened up the world. But it was something so dumb as just asking for a different bike. Like, but it did. It truly was like kind of the thing that started the life that I currently lead and gave me the courage to continue on and explore possibilities that, man, years ago I would have told you there's no way I'd ever. I mean, hosting retreats in Costa Rica, I said I wanted to do that for, 5, 6 years before I actually made the steps to do it. And it all started with riding a bike.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I had a very similar situation through my married life. I had a sister-in-law that was substantially younger. And as she grew up, because she was about 11 when we got married, and as she grew up, and she would go through tennis shoes or clothes or whatever, then I would get the ones that she handed down. I remember, and I loved them. They were awesome. She had the top brands, and we were, young married couple, and so we didn't have a lot of money, so it was great. But I remember during that time when I finally asked to buy my own pair of shoes, I was like, I'm going to spend $100 on my own pair of shoes. It was a really big deal. But like you, it's something stupid, but it was a huge deal. It was a huge deal to me to like, I bought these. These are mine. I didn't have to wear them from someone else.
Well, and I think even just taking, the courage to speak up, because I don't know if it's like a women thing or a culture thing, we're kind of just need to stay small and, not ask for a lot or whatever and always pour. I mean, that's a big thing about what I do with my retreats is like the woman who's always giving to everyone else. If you're not taking care of you, you can't take care of everyone else. And that like light bulb for me when I went from, the yelling, screaming, stressed out, to the max mom, to the person who actually took the time to exercise, have quiet time, find breathing room in my schedule so I wasn't saying yes to everything. When I actually did that, I was a much better mom than all the guilt that I tried to associate with, like, oh, you can't go work out because, surely your kids will die while you're at the gym, which is a lie I told myself for a number of years. So that I'm a big advocate for if you're not pouring into yourself, you can't pour into the people that you love most. But what changed for you when you kind of stopped outsourcing your piece and like really found it for yourself?
Well, I think the realization on my healing journey that I was actually relying on someone else for my happiness. I was saying, okay, well, if he does this, I'll be happy. Or if he says this, I'll be happy. Or if we go here, I'll be happy. And the reality was, I have to be happy inside myself. And if I am not happy inside myself, it's gonna actually protrude out to everyone else, but it's also I'm setting myself up for failure by having those expectations on someone else. And all of that was just part of my healing journey, whether it was self-help books or meditation or prayer or all the things that I clung to at the time. that was huge in the fact that I discovered or just realized it was always there, obviously, but just realizing that no one else is responsible for my happiness. I am responsible for my happiness, whatever that looks like.
Hmm. And I mean, when I was in like the weight loss arena, I mean, you'd see that a lot. Like, I'll be happy when I lose this weight, or the scale says this, or I reach this goal, or I fit in this dress. And I had so many of my clients who would just work so hard to get to that point. And once they hit it, they didn't know what to do. And they ended up gaining all the way back and starting over again. Because, yes, if you are putting your happiness into something else, you're probably never going to be fulfilled. And I think that's such an important piece, especially when it comes to faith, because there's many times in my life where I felt like I couldn't, you know, do the thing or whatever. And I really had to have the faith and trust the Lord that whatever step he was illuminating as my next was going to be the thing, even though it was really scary. I mean, right now I'm in that mode of like the Lord's asked us to sell what I consider our dream home and to trust him with the next chapter to really downsize and be more present with our kids and get like go after my dream that I've had for a long time since I started dreaming of having kids again was to like road school and travel and go. But it's hard to leave what is comfortable, what you consider as your dream. And it's the same way I think too with even as the health, and I talk about this a lot, like if your diagnosis or things that you're battling, because a lot of times, our stress, our trauma will present itself as illnesses. But if you're, identifying as that, you're identifying as just, your child's mom or whatever, and not who you are in the way that the Lord sees you. For me, that was a huge, huge, like game changing thing when I started to see myself as the Lord sees me. Everything changed. And I know that you've probably had a similar like awakening moment when you realized that you weren't, living as your truest self. So I'd love to hear more about that.
I did. It's interesting. And I always tell people the things that I have been through, first of all, you don't focus on your trauma. You focus on what you have, what you do with it. But secondly, is it doesn't take a breakup, a divorce, or something like that to have those aha moments, to realize you don't know who you are. You could be in an empty nester phase, or you could, you're not taking care of your parents anymore, or whatever stage of life that you're in. I think people get to the same place of going, who am I? And I had a hard time with my appearance. And oh, I don't know, my curly hair, my this, my that. I always tell the story of years ago of having a boss that told me that basically curly hair was not professional. I had to pull it back or cut it off. And of course, this is a long time ago, it's in the 90s or whatever. And um, I said, once I was on my own, once I was figuring out who I was, once I turned 50, then it was like, this is what God gave me. God gave me these curls. I'm just going to rock these curls. And so that's one step towards, accepting yourself, feeling better about yourself, realizing that this is how you are wonderfully made, just how you are, curly hair and all. So it wasn't until I was 50 that I took a professional headshot photo for my job with curly hair. Every time I related all, back the whole trauma response, I related back to curly hair's not professional, straighten your hair for photos. And so it was crazy how those messages that we hear from childhood on really are embedded in us and they speak back to us over and over and over. So part of the healing journey is also listening to your gut instinct, but listening to God say, you know what, whether it's moles or freckles or frowns or curly hair or whatever it is, this is how you were made and that's how you're supposed to be.
I love that. By the way, your hair is gorgeous. So
Thank you.
for me, it was my nose. Everybody always made fun of my big nose. My brother made fun of my big nose, and that was like the one thing that I always wanted to fix. And then when presented the opportunity and kind of more as I knew the Lord more, I just thought, why am I going to mess up his masterpiece? That was kind of like the aha moment of just coming to acceptance. And I think that everybody kind of has to come to that point for themselves. And I love that. But if somebody's listening to this and they kind of realize that they've probably spent more of their life just surviving, what would you want them to know?
One of the things that really kind of set me on the path was to start with an attitude of gratitude. And at first I was like, what do I have to be grateful for? I was in my anger mode, I was in my grieving mode. But then it was in the middle of the pandemic, and it was like, okay, I'm thankful I woke up today. So now I'm going out and I'm jogging the trails. I'm looking around. I'm like, oh wow, the scenery. It's just gorgeous on the lake here and everything's beautiful. So I'm grateful for that. That's what I would tell anybody. It was just start with an attitude of gratitude, and that makes all the difference. It makes all the difference in your psyche. It makes all the difference in how you carry yourself. And then once you start to become grateful, it adds confidence as well.
That's such a good thing. When I went through my really tough time deployed, that I had read a book about how thinking of different things every single day that you're grateful for. If you thought of three new things every day for 21 days, it literally changed your brain chemistry. And so I was like, in the thick of it, worst, probably hardest year of my life. So I decided that I was going to embrace this attitude of gratitude. And you're right. Whatever you focus on is what you see. And when you start focusing on your blessings, you see them everywhere and you're not in this pit of despair. I mean, so I'm deployed in the middle of the Middle East and was telling everybody, like, hey, what's one thing, we had Thankful Thursday. And so I'd go around asking all my coworkers, what are you thankful for today? And I had people look at me like completely stunned and couldn't think of anything. And I was like, it is 120 degrees outside and we are working inside an air conditioning. You could at least be thankful for air conditioning. And they're like, yeah, I'm thankful. But as time progressed, every week, it was like they wanted to come to me to share what it was that they were grateful for. So it definitely is like a very powerful, although seemingly easy, maybe, or um, sometimes we think things have to be really hard to make a difference and they don't have to be. So I love that. And I know somebody's listening and they want to connect with you. I would love for you to tell us, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes, but I'd love for them to know how to connect with you.
I have a website. It's called my-resilient-journey.com. On Facebook and Instagram, it's Amey DeAnne, and blame my parents in the 60s and 70s. It's AmeyDeAnne. I know that's a little off and people get kind of confused, but don't forget the E. That makes all the difference.
I love it. I'll make sure that that's in the show notes so that they don't miss it. But, and you mentioned this before, but before we jump off, I would love somebody's listening to this and they just want to know what small step that they could take to really start reconnecting with who they are. I know you mentioned try one new thing, but um, what's something if that's scary, what would you tell the person to do?
And also with in line with the gratitude, because I say start with gratitude. One of the things I told people to do, I said, go to Hobby Lobby, which I have to stay out of that store. But anyway, go to Hobby Lobby, and there's all these things in there, encouraging phrases and you're beautiful, or a scripture, or a, faith, or a this or that, knickknacks, photos. I filled my apartment and ultimately my home with those kinds of things. And for the people that, cannot afford to go purchase all of that stuff, get sticky notes. And that, that's something I even did again recently, was stick them on your mirror, stick them in your closet, telling yourself, I'm beautiful, I'm worthy, I'm enough, I'm whatever that is. So that's a reminder. It's just a simple reminder you can do for yourself, but it's catching.
I love that. Yeah, a friend of mine was telling me she had Bible verses that she put around her house. And she said the key to that, though, is you have to move them around because eventually you'll get used to seeing them. You'll stop reading them. And I was like, that is so true. And so that was the nice thing about having just, sticky notes and post-it notes was just that I could move them around. So I didn't get too accustomed to them. But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and just love and knowing that there's more to life than, yes, we want to take care of everybody else, but we can do that by being our truest selves and taking care of ourselves. So thank you so, so much. Is there anything else that you want to add before we jump off?
At the end of the year, I did add a 365-day journal prompt. So it goes with my book, Finding Your Truest You. It's the same name, Finding Your Truest You. You can get both of them on Amazon. But it's each day it asks a question. It's kind of like going through the Jesus Calling book, but it's not a scripture. It's just a question. And some days it may be something simple, but get on Amazon, get one of those, and just answer the question each day. It's thought provoking. It will allow you to think, oh, well, maybe I need to change my mindset. Maybe I need to think differently. So grab that.
I love that. I'm going to go order mine today. Thank you so, so much. I think it's important to life can be so busy and there's so much noise. I know I used to never sit in quiet, which I do all the time now. It's like there was always a TV going or music or kids or whatever. And to never really sit and think about any of that stuff, those thoughts that you want to hear clearly. So I love that you have that. I'm going to go order mine, but thank you again so, so much. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Susan. I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Faith Over Pharma. If this helped cut through the noise, share it with a friend who always asks, do you think this actually works? And if you're ready to go deeper through immersive retreats, phototherapy, or the Rooted Reset, you'll find your next steps at susangladstein.com.
Thanks for listening.